This podcast is sponsored by Shredlights. Shredlights make the most versatile flashlights in the world. They can be easily attached to any EUC, skateboard, bike, helmet, scooter, one wheel, and much, much more. These pocket-sized lights pack a ton of power in a small form factor to go where other lights can't. They are rider-owned and operated and known for industry-leading customer support with 25,000 riders around the world who trust their products for their daily riding. So please check out this sponsor in the description below for a discount and to support this podcast. Small caveat, guys. Once again, we are having some struggles with the video. I think from now on in the new year, I'm going to be trying a different video method for capturing the video. So obviously it's working here, but unfortunately on this one, there's just some audio. But I assure you, it's still a great, fun podcast, just no video to go with it. So if you're listening on Spotify, obviously this doesn't apply to you or any other audio platform. But if you're on YouTube, I apologize. It's kind of where we're at. I'm a one-man show, but it'll be solved in 2021. I assure you of that. So please enjoy Hsiang Lin.
You know, these wheels could do 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. But the thing that's most incredible about these wheels is the fact that they can do that, but they can also do 2 miles an hour behind somebody. Like I can ride at a walking pace behind another person on a sidewalk and not feel out of place. Mm-hmm. It's that social like kind of interaction between people that you can immediately tell. If you try to ride even an electric bike right down the sidewalk, if there's a mom with a baby carriage and you can look at her right in the eye, you can see exactly the threat level that you pose.
Yeah, you're a nuisance for sure.
Don't try to hide, 'cause I'm gonna harm you like an animal.
Welcome back, everybody, to the EVlution podcast. My name is Mickey, and today with me I have Hsiang Lin, which no one knows how to say your name ever. I think you have to give us a real, like, how do your parents, like, what do they really, don't lie to me, like, what do they call you when you were first born? Not like what they call you now.
Why would I lie about it? That would.
Well, I think you lied just to make life simple for like dumb people and for yourself.
I think it's actually the opposite. I lied to make things more interesting. I like the look of confusion as they look at my name and they try to figure out what is the polite thing to read it, and they inevitably still end up with something just absolutely atrocious. But that's, I think that makes things interesting.
Okay, but you can clarify now. So I know you tell everyone call you Sean, but like every white person I know goes, nah. That ain't how you say that.
It's funny because you're gonna see me trying to avoid answering this question now for precisely for the reason I've given before, because it's people actually call me different things depending on which stage of my life had been. Like all my high school friends call me Lin, and all my college friends call me Cheyenne, which is also the name of a killer whale in Chicago, because a professor made that mistake when first day of class.
I figured it was something like that. So,
and then after that, all of my post-college friends call me Sean. And that's usually what I tell people, because that the sense of relief come over them when they're like, oh, Sean.
But you're making everyone's life difficult, because when I talk to someone else like here in New York and I go, oh, interesting you brought that up. I was talking to Sean the other day about the same thing, and he had this to say, and they go, huh? Who's Sean? And then I go, Hsiang, and I say something very weird, and they go, oh yeah, that guy.
So for the longest time, I was working on this project, and I had a really close relationship with a contractor, and one day he was just like, Sean, you're a really cool guy, but I gotta say, you got your coworker, Hsiang, whatever. I don't know how to read his, but he always send these nasty emails. Can you just tell him to kind of calm down?
he didn't correlate it.
No, he did not correlate it.
Wow.
It was kind of an awkward explanation. I go with it.
Man. Well, I think it's still, albeit easier, it does cause still a bit of confusion no matter what. But If you guys don't know, Sean has a YouTube channel, which I think the channel is just your name. So it's Hsiang Lin on YouTube. And so, yeah, it probably makes it easier for those people to say it instead of trying to pronounce it. But I think until I made that video of the speed board, when I put, like, this is actually how you pronounce his name, a lot, like, the top comments were like, wait, what? Really? I've been saying all kinds of wild things before that. Sean also, well, not also, but mainly his channel is dedicated to electric unicycles like myself. You've been doing it a lot longer than me, though. Like, how many years have you been at it?
Oh my god. I guess I've been. No, I don't feel like it's been that long. I've been doing it for a little bit more than like 2. I think my very first uni video was like 2 and maybe half a years ago. Like I started. I guess it's been 2.5 years because like the first wheel I got, which was the IPS i5, the best unicycle ever made. No.
By the way, it just gets weird when you talk to the camera.
Oh, is it?
Just talk to me.
All right. I'm just. I don't know what to look at.
Yeah, it's okay. It's all good.
This is like the video conferencing thing where they ask you to like look in. You're supposed to look at the little dot that is.
Yeah, this is easier than your name. You just hang out with me and talk. So IPS. So maybe 2.5 years you've been doing it.
Yes.
And if you guys don't watch his channel, I would say that it's a very sort of like in the best way. If you don't like this sort of thing, that's not where I'm going with this, but I do. If you like watching like a good PBS documentary that gives you a timeline of events and is intriguing with the information that you're being hit with, I like to think that your channel is a lot of that. I think it's always chocked full of so much information in the best way. You know, like I said, I enjoy downloading stuff, and a lot of times it's historical somewhat in nature. So I figured we could kind of talk about a little bit of that. Just take a journey. This is sort of the last podcast of the year, so like let's take a journey through what you know at least, because I think it's more than what I know of. Like, where did this crazy electric unicycle thing start? And then let's just try to figure out, come to where we are today, and then we'll kind of pontificate on what we think the future will be.
This is a really, like, the electric unicycle is really a very, very, very strange thing because it just has the most bizarre history, and also it has a strange genesis, and also the way that it have evolved into what it is also not the typical, inventing stories. Like for the longest time, like the thing that we all like know now, like whenever there's a product, there's mic or like anything, like it's usually you have an inventor, here or wherever, he has this idea like, okay, I want to make this really cool gadget. He goes, he like come up with a prototype, work on it in his garage, and then finally he got something working really well. Mm-hmm. And then he go find like people who can willing to kind of fund him, and then once he has that, then he go find like a partner that can actually produce this thing,
right?
And then he goes and produce it, and then he goes market, sells it, and this and that. But that is not really how the electric unicycle come into being, or at least in its original form. It did have an evaluation, like evolution, like its origin is like that, but somewhere in the middle it kind of went sideways. Like it started with Segway, and the story as I have heard was that Segway was making motorized wheelchairs. Dean Kamen was the inventor behind Segway, and he was making like these motorized wheelchair. And one of the things he wanted to do with these wheelchairs, that he thought that when someone who's sitting in a wheelchair rolling around, when they talk to someone, they always have to look up. So he thought, like, wouldn't it be great if I give these people who have to sit in a wheelchair the chance to stand? So he was trying to make a wheelchair that actually stand up. So that's actually where the self-balancing vehicle came from. This concept of a wheelchair that is actually able to stand up on 2 wheels. The wheelchair they were making before had 4 wheels. So he wanted to make this mechanism that allow it to actually stand up and balance on 2 wheels. And then I think it went from there into like a device that can actually climb stairs in addition to kind of standing up. And because of that, they thought like, the way this mechanism kind of try to self-balance.
So there was a gyro at this point.
There was a gyro
somewhere.
at this point, and this thing self-balanced. But I think like, it was like at first they could only make it self-balance standing still, and then they were trying to make it, start to move while self-balancing. And like the story I heard was that they said it looked like kind of a Ginger Roger, like dancing up and down stairs when it was trying to climb stairs. So the prototype was named Ginger because of
Interesting.
it. So they went from there, and then they figure out, wait a minute, we made this thing that could self-balance and move someone around. It doesn't have to just be a wheelchair. We can make it so that people can stand on it. And
Right.
this could be like a mobility device. And then they made it. They made a prototype. They had people ride around, on it. And then that's like this is the whole craziness with the Segway. He showed it to all these, head of company. Like he famously showed it to Steve Jobs, who was so apparently impressed that Steve offered to take him under his wing as his pupil. Like he offered to be his mentor, and
I'm sure there was more to it than just altruism. I'm like, oh, this is great. I'm sure he wanted his talons inside of that tech.
the thing that I find fascinating was that the reason why all of those people thought that the Segway was this thing that was absolutely mind-blowing and that it will change the world was also the reason why the EUC is so amazing. Like the only difference being is that Segway, because it's made by a company here in the US and they need to be perfectly, they can't, they're afraid of being sued. They have to be compliant with all the local jurisdiction and all of that. It was slow. Like they could not make it go faster because if they do.
Really? You think that's why it didn't go too fast?
So supposedly there's a whole thing about how Steve Jobs
Sounds like a good cover for just not being good.
No,
at
this
making
was a
something
real
fast.
concern because so when Steve Jobs saw it, he loved the concept so much that he offered to take the guy under his wing, the inventor.
I'm surely for no other reason but just altruism.
Right. I mean, also he's such an ego, dude that he think that,
He probably was like, I deserve to have that tech under my company.
It also takes a special person to go around to other like full-grown adult that are like head of their company to say, let me be your mentor.
Special is definitely an interesting choice of words.
Right. It's a very curious thing. But I also read that he had actually sent the guy a memo like, a few months in that says, this is a great concept, but if you ever have a single guy who falls down and hurt themselves, that would be the end of your company. And I think there was full recognition that this is a very, it's a danger.
It's interesting because a lot of people ask me online, maybe you too, like, I've got it more recently, but like, are EUCs as safe as I think? And I'm like, no. Short answer, no. Why else would we wear like full moto gear? I don't know if there's a solve for that, but it's just fascinating you bring that up because it's like, I made a whole video on like, you are going to crash your electric unicycle. It's more of a matter of when. So you should just gear up, But so this is probably why a lot of people always ask too, how come there's no American company making this? It doesn't take a lot of imagination to imagine why, like because of what you just said. Like,
Right.
Like if soccer moms are buying it and trying to use it to just roll down the street to the grocery store, which fair, I do that. But there's still a chance of just like cut out, like goodbye.
Which is like, so this is a very curious thing that I often think about, and I think about really kind of, I don't know. I think about weird things. So indulge me, but
We're here to indulge.
right. But it's like it's like innovation here in the US, right? For the longest time, like American like invent everything, like just so much stuff come out of this country. But we have gotten to a point where you can no longer really take any risk. You know, if you take any risk, if something doesn't work out, the amount of liability associated is tremendous. Like a company, like an American company, just can't make, I mean, and this is the thing, like the immediate reaction to this is like, of course, like we have to make something safe. Like everything has to be safe. You know, we can't risk having a single injury, you know, and it's like a concept that we have.
Does that bother you?
No,
they want to keep people safe.
But it's just like it's a thing that, you know, that everyone have kind of grown used to the concept of, like, you know, in your business, in my business, like the option to fail is not really it's not an option. Like it just, you know, everyone assume that everything has to be perfectly safe and that you have to always work towards that. And if there's a single chance that something could be dangerous, then let's not do that thing. And that is fine, except there are other places in the world where the people are not limited by such constraint.
Sure.
Who are willing to, you know, basically push for progress at any cost.
Right. Yeah.
Which is, of course, China.
There are other places.
Right, other places. And this is why EUCs are all made in China, because it's something like this just could not. And it's just like in some way.
There's no way it would have been progressed to where we are today if it was all American made. I mean, for sheer, you know, I am a fan of capitalism, but there are negative sides too. But so, anyways, my point is that the sheer looking at Future Motion, that they have one effective product. They have, by what we can tell, no desire to make something better because they have the patent on it and no one else can make it. And if they try to make it, they sue the pants off of them. So it's like that in conjunction with what you're saying about safety. Like I'm thankful that it's all been made in China so far, because otherwise, like I said, we wouldn't have what we have in house, a 3,200 watt hour and a 3,600 watt hour electric unicycle.
Right.
I can't imagine that if it was American made. Like I said, Future Motion's like range is like 7 miles.
So Future Motion, I mean, the speed limit for electric vehicle in the EU is like what, 25 kilometer per hour. So that's
something
like
that,
19. Yeah. So that's the speed of a one wheel. So just like, to me, that is the maximum speed that a liability conscious Western company would ever make a vehicle to go.
Because then you have InMotion, who make wheels well beyond 25 kilometers an hour, but they, at least recently, I don't know how long they've had it, but they have just this function in their app that says, just make it comply with my local laws. You just click it and then it limits your speed, which is like actually pretty Western of them if you really think about it. It's just like, it's like we have cars, like your car, if you own a car out there, your car probably hits 100 at least, depending on what you, like a Camry or whatever you have. Right. Maybe 80 at worst is like the top speed. But the top speed on any highway in America is not 80. Well, maybe. But you know what I mean? Like you can't go 100 to 150. You can't do that in America. So they make them well capable of more. And we have local laws that say you just can't do it. But yeah, it's funny that and then the other side of that is Gotway, and I guess Kingsong too, that make vehicles way beyond whatever local laws, and just don't care to put a limiter in it. It's just up to you. Well, I guess you kind of can limit them your own on in the app, but in general, of all of them, Gotway has no bones about it. They don't care. They're just making the fastest of the fast of the fast.
Well, and also the other thing you have to realize is that this is a very recent phenomenon for EUCs. Like,
yeah, of course.
It's not like if you look like
when we started, people just wanted to kind of glide around. Right, that term still is around. Like, I just like to glide on my wheel. I'm like, glide, bro. I'm trying to smash my face into the pavement. I don't know about you.
and this is the thing that I find like kind of really interesting, because like, if you look like, people who have been, riding an EUC, for more than, like 4 or 5 years, like they early on, like you really deal with, wheels that have like, like you like I seen some of these early review videos where you like if you if you like drop down a curb, the thing cut out.
I remember watching
know?
Chooch videos. Shout out to Chooch. His videos like with earlier Gotways, like I think he had an M Super V2 or something like that, where he was riding somewhere like Denver or wherever he lives. And the little part of a sidewalk where it ends and meets the street that's like yellow with little bumps. He hit that and it cut out. I mean, it wasn't even like a curb. And he was just like, dang, Gotway. So people who get into it now, they really have no clue where this all kind of started.
Yeah, so I feel like, like the capability of what these wheels are able to do are advancing at such a fast pace that, I feel like, so the people who, who are riding these, and their idea of what it is they're looking for in an electric unicycle is very different than someone who like got into it, from 3 years ago versus someone who got into it from like this year.
Which is sad because I get messages all the time from people saying, hey, I found this E Plus and it's like $50. Should I buy it? I'm like, no. Like, I don't understand. It's a great deal. I'm like, that's a supreme deal. If it was, they don't get that like that tech back then, which was only like 5 years ago or whatever. That's like a horse and buggy. So you're like, listen, I could buy a Toyota Camry for $10,000, $8,000, but for $50, I can get a horse and buggy. What you think, Mickey? It's like, I think you probably want the car.
Right. It's like something from like anything more than 3 years ago is
It's unsafe tech, if we're honest.
Right. Yeah, like I don't know, because again, I started like 2.5 years ago, so anything before my time I wouldn't know anything about, but based from what I have heard, which is mostly from my friend Chris, who hates everything, so I don't know whether or not I should take it with a grain
Shout
of
out
salt.
to Copycat, who definitely does not listen to this. No chance. But send it to him. If you guys know him, send him a link to this.
Yeah, exactly. Remind him. Just say, "Oh, I heard Sean said this about you."
Yeah. Make it seem like we were talking crap about him, and then let him. He'll dive in. He'll secretly like, I don't care, but he'll secretly listen. And if you're listening now, Chris, I apologize. Now you're like, dang it, they wasted my time.
But yeah, but even like this year, I would say like, all the negative reaction, like this is the thing, right? Like with the EX, and I just saw like Adam, I can never say his Adam. I have still a little bit. Wrong way. Shout out to Wrong Way.
You can't
Adam.
say the word Adam.
Adam. Yeah,
That's weird for you.
Yeah, it's weird.
That's
for
fascinating.
Me. The Adam and the word.
So you keep
squirrel.
putting an N at the end.
Adam. Yeah, I can't.
A damn.
Adam.
Can you say a damn? He'll accept
Adam.
that. Damn, like damn it.
A damn. Adam.
See, that's Adam. Just say a damn. He'll accept it.
All right, let's move on before people get really bored. But like, I just saw his review, and like, he like there was this section where he was talking about how terrible the shell was, and he just kind of grabbed the headlight and he just pulled, and the thing just comes off.
Was it an MSP or something?
No, it was the EX.
Oh, all right.
And and everyone, and then the trolley handle is terrible, and
It's like 3D printed, basically.
Right, exactly. It's all this thing that's terrible. And like people are just like, oh, this is so unacceptable for a wheel this price. But like literally, the only reason why we are disgruntled and feel like this should be fixed, or it can be fixed, is because like the Sherman exists as a thing. Like all the way up until like,
I need like one of those sparkling eye sounds. Bing.
right. Like all the way up until like, Veteran came onto the market. Like we all just dealt with it. We're just like, this is just Gotway.
Yeah.
Gotway is just how it is. If you want a fast wheel, you just have to deal with all this problem. You have to deal with the shell. You have to put something on it to protect it. It is just how it is, and
Dude,
you never think about it.
I put together, when I got it from Jason, I put together right here on this floor the Monster Pro and the EXN together, And like I'm putting it together and I'm just like noticing internally some things are okay. Like the control board looks a little bit better on like the Monster Pro and stuff, but like it just feels disheartening. Maybe it's because we're just in it too far, but you're just like, is it really still just made it? Small example is like the batteries in both of them. The battery packs, the cable comes out like one of the corners, right? It always comes out one of the corners. Okay, fine. Maybe that's appropriate. But the shell does not make room for that. It's like they designed the shell not knowing that cable was going to come out right there. And there's literally like a pinch point on all both these wheels where that cable that comes out of it is like at a pinch point. It has to be. It's just like, what? How did you not just like cut out a little bit of your shell to make room for this?
Like my favorite example is the pedal on the Sherman. So every single Gotway pedal have these two little plastic spacer.
Right.
And every time you pull out the rod that holds the pedal, the spacer go flying in. You have to go look for
Can't
it
find
and
it.
lose
Yeah.
and this
falls,
and that.
It falls inside the wheel.
It's
somewhere.
like a pain in the rear end thing. And Sherman just have those little two bump built into the pedal. So you never have to worry about the spacer. It's just like you just take the pedal off. And it's just like so for me, because again, I'm a designer, I think about these things and it's just like I know how the process work. And it's two completely different set of mentality. One in which this guy see this problem every day, but he does not fix it. He'd go through this. I mean, the people at Gotway, they install these pedal like hundreds and thousands of times.
Well, they're just factory workers, the people who install it.
The whole process is integrated. It's together. Like
It's like grandmas putting together King songs. If you've seen the behind the scenes of these, I'm not kidding. They're wearing like little, Chinese sandals that you would buy here in Chinatown that are made of like mesh.
Right.
They're wearing it on the factory floor, putting these things together. I like to imagine they're paid at least minimum wage.
Right.
I like to imagine that.
But yeah, I mean, the guy who's actually building the wheel may not talk to the guy who's designing the wheel, but that's also part of the problem because
Right.
these things should be integrated.
The biggest thing I noticed when I got the M Super Pro back in the day when it was stuff, I had the first one. It came in the mail. I put it together. The pedals, I can't ever say it, the tetrahedral angle or whatever it is of the pedals. One Gotway is obviously more pronounced, but no joke, it was like 15 degrees. Mm-hmm. And everyone online, for whatever, was like, "Oh, you're dumb." That's how they are. I'm like, no. I have a Gotway. I know what they're like, and this is not correct. But the point is, it was way off, and then I had to shave them down like a whole like half an inch for it to work. And Marty finally got it. Was like, "Whoa, dude, this is crazy." But the point is, like, they're sending me a demo wheel to do a video review on. No one just like flipped them open. You would have saw it. You know what I mean? It was that pronounced. You would have been like, I don't think that's right. Or like, it's a sample wheel. Dude, ride it around your backyard, Gotway. Like before you send it off. To where like, I obviously like let that go because I understand that that's like a oversight and not so much a reflection on that wheel per se. That was like, okay, that's an issue. I do let like Jason know behind the scenes, like, hey, this is really bad. But like, I could have just been like, what the heck is this? You know what I mean?
I mean, to me, I'm like, okay, an oversight because you don't really care about this thing. There are things that are really great with Gotway wheels, the right quality being like the thing that we all kind of love. Mm-hmm. This is why a lot of people ride Gotways because the feeling, the performance, and like more than just the performance, even the motor feel, like when you lean on a Gotway wheel, like the feedback it gives you, the amount of like power that like it's completely different than something than King Song, or Emotion. And it's different from even a Sherman. So
I remember 16X to Nikola, right? My 100 volt. As soon as I the one that I finally purchased, as soon as I stepped on it. Mm-hmm. Actually, no, I felt it too with Chris's when I borrowed his, but you can just feel there's like a lot. It's a ridiculous way to think of it. I felt like the magnets were wound tight. Because you could feel the power just in the small bit of 2 mile an hour takeoff. You're like, oh, there's something else going on here.
And it's just like this is a huge part of riding. Like especially these guys in New York that push the wheel to the very limit. They know their motor like really well. They know like Chris liked to talk about how he like lean it just so that it start to dip a little bit. Like they know like that motor feel like that
Yep.
is absolute. Like this is why a lot of these MSX rider would never switch because they know like that feel
Feeling, yeah.
so well that that's what they want, and they're willing to deal with any kind of problem. Everything else they can fix, they can deal with just to get that. And to a certain extent, like I feel like that's the way Gotway think. They think the same way. They just say, okay, I'm going to focus my effort onto making this motor and making like and the other thing like a lot of people talk about range and then battery size. The other thing that battery size is critical is that it gives you a lot more headroom. Like the performance of an electric unicycle comes from a combination between the motor and the battery. So if you have a big battery, so like for instance, the S18, the problem with that, smaller battery is not only that you have less range, but also because you have less capability for the motor to draw on. So there's
less headroom.
So there's more possibility if you really push that wheel that it will cut out.
So King Song, if you're listening, next year I propose you do the S18 again, a little less sleek, 2,000 watt hours or something close to it, maybe 1850, 1845, something like that, 100 volt. That would be the most killer off-road wheel for these guys who like to jump stuff in the Midwest and the West Coast. Like that would be killer. That's I think for me the S18, as I said in my video, was like the best suspension EUC. The only thing it lacked was the capability to hold you. We saw guys here in New York who were just like MSX riders hop on it to just test it out and cut it out like 10 feet down the street because they just like pushed it too hard and that was it.
Yeah, because again, if you're a regular Gotway rider and you're used to the amount of power that those motor give you, like as a feedback, like it's when you write anything else, it just feels like paper mache.
Well, you started off with an IPS 5,
right?
What has that been? So obviously we jumped a little bit. We went from wheelchair to MSX, but it's okay. So really quickly before we get to the IPS 5, so we went from wheelchair to them realizing, oh, we can make this move, and it's fascinating that we can make people balance upright. So then we got a Segway. Apple wanted in on the Segway, right? And then eventually, how did we get to the one-wheeled version?
So Segway was a flop when it was launched, but they kind of try to make. I feel like a lot of company does this when their product failed to catch the public's imagination. They're like, oh, this is for commercial use, and then they try to hit the corporate because then you can charge more money and justify it. And that may not work, but either case, they were just kind of crawling along. And then here's where things kind of get a little bit murky for me. I know Shane Chen, who started Solo Wheels.
Shane Chen is a very prominent figure in this space.
Yes, he is. So he started Solo Wheel, I think, I don't recall the exact year, so don't quote me.
Did he invent the unicycle?
Well, okay, you have to be very careful about it because they were prior arts. They were prior example of people who made electric unicycle. He was not the first one. He was the first one to file a patent.
So he's like Edison.
That describe electric unicycle. However, the difference between him and Edison is that Edison filed a patent that described a light bulb in its entirety. And based on my understanding, and I'm not a patent attorney, Shen Chen's patent described an electric unicycle, but the patent itself is only for the pads on the electric unicycle.
It's weird that you say that. There's a lot of controversy, especially with Grumpy Cat, of all people, on this topic, because now, just to jump forward again for a second, Gotway has recently felt the heat from Sherman, from the veteran, or from the Veteran Sherman. I always do that. It's so close. And they're trying to sue So they got the patent from Shane Chen. We'll come back and go lead up to this, but they got the patent from Shane Chen somehow, which is, we'll come back to why that's crazy. And they're trying to sue Veteran in such a way that doesn't allow them to productively conduct business due to the fact that they now own the patent to the EUC, which you're saying is only for the pads, though.
Well, that is, again, So the patent I read are the U.S. patent. There's a different set of patents in China, and the Chinese patent is, I believe, what Gawei bought. I don't think Gawei bought the U.S. patent.
Okay. By the way, if you're listening and you didn't realize this podcast was for super enthusiasts, welcome aboard.
This is the nerdy part. This is the nerdy history of EUCs.
So all right, so he had some level of ingenuity behind one of the very first sort of like produced EUCs.
Yes, I think he was the first to produce a commercially sold EUC. Like the prior example that I have seen were all like homebrew, like people who build an electric unicycle that says, oh, look, this is an electric version of unicycle,
right.
And they're able to ride around with it. So prior art exists, which means that he is, this is probably why he was able to file a patent for the entirety of electric unicycle and why he ended up settling on just getting pads.
Right.
But either way, he was the one who actually marketed a solo wheel, which is an electric unicycle. So, and that's why he kind of has been, holding on to that concept, which is fine. However, the problem being is that he didn't really run with the concept. Like solo wheel, the last product they sold was more than 10 years old. And, anyone who's contemplating on buying a solo wheel, do not do it. And
also because we're talking at this point now, we're talking about Kleenex versus tissue thing, because a lot of people come to us and say, is that a solo wheel? And we're super nerds. So we're like, no. And they go, yes, it is. You're like, no, it's really not. It's an electric unicycle. They go, yeah, solo wheel. You're like, no, solo wheel's a brand,
right,
or a company. This thing is an electric unicycle. And they go, yeah, solo wheel. That, or we get one wheel, which actually is a more fair sort of like thing to claim against us. Is like, oh, that's a one wheel. I get that. But anyways, that's like super nerdy. Like that happens to me from time to time.
Right. I mean, either way, like in case if anyone is curious as to why there's no U.S. company that make current generation electric unicycles, because Shane Chen owns a patent that he enforced. So he would go after anybody. If you want to build your own electric unicycle and sell it as a product, you're going to get a call from this guy, and he's going to tell you.
There's got to be a way around it, though. There's got to be. Not that I've often said online, I think that it would be problematic for a U.S. company to create one successfully. It'd be very hard, aside from Shane Chen, just like, about safety and keeping people safe. And, that would be a big problem, and speed laws and all that kind of stuff. And then but I think that it would probably cost like $8,000.
I don't think it would. I think it just I think a viable product could definitely be made. It would just take, like someone need to put in the effort of trying to come up with a
the first
product.
American rendition, I think, would be overpriced because they'd have to put all this R&D into making it what it is. I think in a few years maybe it would come down, but at first I think it would just be way more than we're used to paying. That's my.
I think like the problem with the EUC is that it's always a solution that's looking for a problem, because, and when I say that, I don't mean that it's not solving any problem, but rather that we kind of
like
figure
an iPad.
The iPad is very different. Like, so, from a design perspective,
Seems like you love iPad.
I'm a hardcore like window person.
I've seen your home office. I've seen it.
But I went to the iPad for like a very specific reason, because like I had a particular use case. You know, I do a lot of so.
But still, to this day, you have to argue that like people, even myself, look at an iPad. Aside from like my kids used to watch Netflix and stuff, like it's hard to just like if you're like, okay, I need a laptop or whatever, right? And you're like iPad, laptop, iPad, laptop. It's still a weird choice.
So
like
I picked it for a very specific reason, right? This is my personal weird like theory, and this is also why I have a Samsung Note phone. If you're in a meeting, right, and you're having a conversation, and someone take out a laptop and he start typing on it, you're like, I don't know what he's doing. Maybe he's emailing someone else. But if someone take out what looks like, you know, iPad or phone or whatever, and he takes a stylus and start writing on it, that person is taking note.
very fascinating perspective.
It's as compared to a person typing. And
maybe a little too good-hearted of you.
like it's really three different like, because you know what, like your physical, like your motion, what you do have meanings. Like, so if you're typing on a laptop, that conveys a slightly different message than you with a stylus writing, versus you on a phone typing. You could be taking notes as well, but because the phone is more of a communication device, the person is going to feel even more like, man, that guy is just texting his girlfriend. He's not even listening.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's just it's
I can get with the phone thing for sure. That
right.
That reads as like,
so like
he has no interest in like what's happening.
Exactly. It's just like, are you paying attention when someone is looking at his phone? So it's like, for me, when I say, you know, did
I prove my point?
Like a problem and a solution, like that's what I meant. Like I meant, like the iPad is very specifically like, you know, when Steve Jobs did the presentation, there was a couch at that presentation. He walked to the couch, he sat down, and he put the iPad on his lap, because that was a demonstration of how you're supposed to use the iPad. Versus the iPhone presentation, he was on his feet, because you were supposed to walk around and be able to use the iPhone that way. Like, these products are extremely targeted towards a specific kind of like, you know, activity / lifestyle / like a kind of like how, like it's designed specifically to be used in a very particular way.
And the EUC has.
And the EUC has none of that.
Yeah.
Is the exact polar opposite of it, where is a guy in China who make this thing and just like, I don't know, somebody seemed to be willing to pay a lot of money for it, so I'll just keep making it.
Sure.
And that's the weird thing with the EUC, because, you know, we have a lot of complaint about like, oh, you know, the Gateway, like, you know, there's all these detail that's wrong and this and that. But like, if you go to like AliExpress and you look at the hundreds and hundreds of other weird, bizarre version of self-balancing vehicle they sell,
right?
Like, just some of these things are so far off that you're just like, how is this a product, and how is there people still making this? But they are. And I feel like the thing that we're writing is one of these things that just happened by chance, not by intention. Like, unlike, you know, there isn't a group of designer and engineer who's like, okay, I'm going to design a product that's targeting this particular segment of the population. No, they just made like 10 different 10 different factory randomly decide that they were going to make these 10 things because they saw it, you know, on a you know, whatever, you know, TV thing in the US. Like, this is where like the whole hoverboard came into be, because, you know, Shen Chen like made a prototype, and then one of these factories saw it, you know, on YouTube. They're like, oh, I can call my cousin. He's an electrical engineer. You know, he can help me build a prototype. Like, then they made one.
That seems to be a prominent mindset in China, right? Like, oh, I can do that without sort of any typical sort of respect or regard for like the guy who made the first product. Like, in America, if I saw that you created, I don't know, the first electric skateboard or whatever, it's fine that I think to myself, oh, I can do that too. But there's sort of like this, I don't know, an unsaid sort of rule book about how you go about making your version of it. Whereas in China, there doesn't seem to be the same sort of rule book. It's just culturally different.
This is the thing I find most curious about like the EUC and how it kind of, like the different, like this is what actually make me think about the whole like question of innovations here in the US, because it's just like you said, here there are all these rules like, oh, we can't make like anything that's, too fast, that may be dangerous, like if the government makes a ruling that says, if the EU makes a ruling that says, okay, electric vehicle can't go faster than 20 miles, 20 kilometer per hour, then the company would think, okay, especially when they go talk to their attorney, the lawyer team would just say, oh, even though there isn't a ruling here, if someone get injured, we can at least say, look at the EU standard. We were compliant with this sort of standard overseas, which has, so it like, get them out of a little bit of liabilities. So they have to think about all these things. They have to think about intellectual, property, and all these things have to be overcome with money and resources. And this is what will lead to a more expensive product that isn't really as good. And unfortunately, this is what I thought really killed the Segway originally, because they weren't able to make it faster because they were worried about liability. They weren't able to make it, more like they have to make it
more portable.
Yeah, more portable. They have to make it super stable so that someone, who have a poor sense of balance could still ride it. Like literally, bicycle as a product could not be invented today because it's too dangerous. So many things that we have today is not possible because it's like, imagine if the car didn't exist today. Like, really, you're gonna put people in this box?
Do you know how many people died?
Right, exactly. The amount of people that could die, like you can kill people. Like, imagine someone who's not of right of mind get behind one of these things. He could just plow into a crowd and kill hundreds.
Well, it's funny because now we have the Segway Mini Pro, which I have one of them here, and I have plenty of electric unicycle riders who stop by for whatever reason and see it and go, cool, I never tried that. Can I try it? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I give them like a 2-second talk about kind of how it functions, and they look like complete noobs trying to get on the thing. And it's like, it's designed to hold you. Like, it's unlike a unicycle where it's sort of like all on you.
Right.
I mean, more or less. It's just funny to see that like it's a easier piece of tech that has almost no learning curve, unlike the EUC, and they're just like baby giraffes that just came out of the mother. That's how they look.
It's a very strange thing, because it's like, and then like the EUC, I try to think about it and try to think like, okay, what should it be? Like what would be, because it's still possible. You can still make it work. Like, the problem, like this really, I think you have, said like this is kind of like the original MP3 players, and it really remind me of of that particular piece of tech, because one of the biggest problem with MP3 player at the time was also regulations, because all the companies were just like, oh, these people are just stealing music.
Yeah, I mean, because I remember like I guess we might have missed it on this version of the podcast now, but I had a friend back when MP3s just came out, my Jewish friend. His family had a lot of money, and he was one of the first humans I knew who had one. But his was a bit plasticky, a little cheapy looking, but it still held quite a few pieces of music, more than a CD at the time. But then when the iPod came out, it was a whole other ballgame. We would just looked at him and laughed.
One of the best example of the insanity that is the initial MP3 player thing was my friend bought a Sony MP3 player. Like, Sony actually made an MP3 player, and it had really wonderful sound, and it's has higher quality like components, and it had good review. Except because Sony also is a huge music, producer and content, owner, they were obviously very concerned about the people, who may use their music player as a way to pirate music. So they had this just absolutely impossible system in which, you have to go through just to get music onto the device. You have to use their proprietary like software to transfer your CD music. It has to be a CD.
Well, Apple basically did that too.
Well, this is just a start. So you have to get it on, from the CD to your computer, and then you have to you can then take that file and put it onto your MP3 player. Except you can only play it 3 times, at which point it expires. And then you have to redo the transfer from the CD into your computer
To this
and then
day,
onto your thing.
music copyright laws are insane.
It just like it like that thing was literally destroyed because of the need to protect
Right.
their
Do you
other
remember
business.
the Zune?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
I think Microsoft, that was theirs. They're trying to compete, and they had a bit cooler marketing at the time than iPad did. But ultimately, we know who won because it's probably a similar scenario. But okay, so enough iPad talk or iPod talk. I like that stuff, but I think that so now we have this electric unicycle that exists. That Shane Chen had some hand in, and Solo Wheel existed. Like, what brought us, let's say, from there to maybe your first wheel, which is IPS 5, and then eventually to sort of, we'll call it like the M Super V3 days. Like what transpired? Just progression. Like what was that?
So Shan Chen also famously invented and designed the hoverboard.
That's right.
And he was
When it was knocked off, there was no BMS.
right. I mean, and he was horribly burned by this because they actually knocked off the hoverboard before he even released it as a product.
Oh boy.
So they start selling the knockoff hoverboards before he actually started selling it.
And they missed a key component,
Right.
which we're saying he really got burned by this because
Right.
they didn't have the BMS, which if you don't know what that is, it regulates what the battery does, how it performs. It tells it when to accept charge, not accept charge. So you would plug in your hoverboard overnight, leave it overnight. It would just keep pumping amperage into that thing until it blew up, basically.
Right. So, and this become like a huge problem, and government regulate against it. And there
We had
were
those
all these,
dumb signs in New York that
Right.
says no hoverboards allowed on the subway.
Exactly. But at the same time, this is purely my own speculations. But from the other side of the ocean, the story seems to be very different. If you're a Chinese manufacturer, you're like, wait a minute. So I saw this guy invent this thing, and I copied it, and I sold a crap load of it, and made all this money. Let's see what he has next.
Right.
And
Let's just watch what he's
let's
gonna put out.
watch him. Oh, he has this other electric unicycle thing. Let me call my cousin who is an engineer and see whether or not
That's crazy.
He can. I mean, again, this is just my own speculation, but like literally in Shenzhen, like they're just hundreds and hundreds of company making just all different varieties of different things. They're just looking for things to make, just to see whether
Like
or
throwing
not
paint
they
at
get
the wall just to see what sticks.
Exactly. And they were just seeing what sticks. And, out of all of those, out of all the variations of self-balancing devices, and, again, if you go to AliExpress, you'll see some bizarre examples.
You can ride a bowling pin. You can ride a football. The list goes on.
Right. And the thing is that electric unicycle, like the company that we now know as these large manufacturers, Gotway, Kingsong, and they're like, even like there was a few that's defunct, like
Kingsong.
IPS. Like, they are
Right.
the one that happen to hit the right combination.
That's right.
Between form factor, control board, quality, and all of this. And that's why their manufacturing quality control is so poor because, well, it's a matter of perspective. The QCs are bad comparing to a lot of other,
To like a Western product.
To a Western product, but these are the guy that actually made better product that good enough for
Yeah.
for the community.
You said it. I always like to harp on that phrase.
Right.
the Chabador of China is
Yes.
real. It's a real way of life.
And the main thing that they want to hit is that they want a thing that is sufficiently quality to able to to be able to satisfy like a niche hobbyist market, which is what the EUC had been for the longest time, and as I mean, hardcore people are willing to deal with problems.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, though, there were some of us who, I mean, I wrestle with this like in my brain a lot, which I didn't think I ever would. But like as someone who makes like video reviews, I don't only do reviews, but like it's become a bigger part of my YouTube experience. And like on the one hand, we get pre-production models, right? So we're like hype men, right? Before the wrapper comes out. So there's a bit of a responsibility to sort of like showcase what the wheel's about. There is not a lot of responsibility, at least I'm not feeling any pressure of it to like hide anything. But also there's not any responsibility to be that truthful either. Like no one's like saying, make sure you showcase the crap. I feel personally like I like to showcase the good about every wheel up front. And then on the back end, I kind of talk about the things that I felt poor. And I think maybe sometimes I'm more critical than most, but I got to think that at some level it helps because either they'll stop sending us pre-productions to be videoed and maybe start sending them as like here, try to break it, let us know. And then we'll send you the final. Or at least they'll just start making better choices before they send it to us. Like I feel like the more we are, again, we don't have to be jerks, but the more we're sort of truthful about here's the real experience of said wheel, I think the more it'll encourage them to like change their QC or just figure out a way to not like look bad. Not that my intention is ever to make them look bad. I just mean like that just comes along, I think, with the territory now. It's like, okay, there's a crappy trolley handle on this thing. Like everyone hates the EXN and the EX and the Monster handle. And it's like, yeah, it's really bad. However, compared to an MSX handle, it's about on par as far as like the experience goes. It's like poor quality. If you were to drop it on that thing, it's definitely toast. It's a little weird to get in and out, and like it's not really going to hold a lot of weight. It could spin out on you, like all those kind of things. So it's kind of on par.
I mean, I think it's a matter of perspective. I don't know whether or not it's,
Yeah.
The thing is that EUC really had came very far in a very short amount of time. And this is why, for me, I
That's
feel
why
like...
you can't buy an old wheel.
Right. Yes. But also, like, there's a different set of expectations. Like, again, if the EX was released as a product last year, people would thought it was groundbreaking and that it was the best thing ever, and that everything about it was wonderful.
Or even if they had released before the S18.
They just had to release it before the Sherman. That's what they had to do.
So this is fast. I'm trying not to skip too far ahead. I feel like we kind of are. I think we're probably in our like modern day era now, but like. The Sherman, just to harp for 2 seconds on this, is like, as you sort of said maybe in our before we lost video, like it just did it right. Like they just saw, this is what you get actually weirdly in a great way. People who worked for a company making wheels for such a long time, break off, make their own company and go, okay, here are the things that either they saw as problematic or just heard us talk about as problematic and then just actually change them.
Like that was a thing I had to say that, that was the thing that impressed me the most when it comes to the Sherman. Like I remember, first of all, being lucky enough to get the first one to ship to the US. And then I had to open it up to put the battery in. And like the first thought that came to mind when I did that was just, man, like the guy who designed this thing actually cared, about the wheel. Like there were so many little things, I was saying before, like the spacer on the pedal, being integrated into the pedal itself so that it's not like these two washers that just always kind of, go flying and go, missing. The screw on the side panel was a size larger, so you don't have to worry about stripping them as much. There were just so many little details that you can tell. It's just, it's like people who have been doing this for a while and who have been thinking about it and who are just like, okay, I'm gonna make this better, and that in turn gave me faith that this is going to be a better wheel because I knew that they cared, and that was the most important thing.
Yeah, it was definitely a step forward in this technology that is, like you said, very hopeful. But yeah, so you had an IPS 5, and that was like, why did that company not work out?
Well, so the IPS i5 is this incredible thing. First of all, it's an electric scooter electric unicycle that weighs, I think like, how much did it weigh? Like 20 pounds. No, less than that. I think like 18. And it is only 1.5 inches thick, and it has a 14-inch diameter wheel inside. It has a range of 12 miles, and it max out at 12 miles per hour speed. So on a PEV scale, it's a pretty capable machine, but it's just so tiny and small and nice. But the problem is that it's this whole last gen versus this gen conversation. When you open up that wheel, the motor is literally built into the case itself. So when you pull the two sides of the case apart, the motor comes apart. And like the magnet versus the coil on one side, and like the thing has a gap, and you can see the coil if you lift up the wheel and look underneath it.
Wow.
And they claim this wheel is I have no idea how they're able to even like say that, but they said the wheel is waterproof. Like,
that can't be true. I remember I considered getting one as like a side silly thing to take the trash out at one point, and everyone I talked to about it was like, "Why would you do that?"
No,
it's not waterproof. It's like the first thing they would mention is the water thing. I think they said around the power button. It was actually a big problem area.
Heck with like the motor's completely open. Like when I pull the thing apart, like you can see dirt and leaves inside the motor compartment, like between the magnet and the coils.
Which makes funny that people today complain about dust or
right, exactly. Like it was just like it's. But again, at the time, this is the sense I get is that this is not an unusual thing for then because. Again, we're talking about manufacturing that were just making things that were barely kind of functional.
Right.
Like if you go to AliExpress at the time, you buy a wheel, you're like, okay, you're really risking a lot, and you're hoping, and you better know what the heck you're doing, and you know how to fix some of these things. And the impression I get from talking with people who were riding at the time is that they all had to be like super careful, and they trust no one. Like they are all convinced that the manufacturers does nothing but lie and cheat, and they're just trying to get a thing that kind of barely work in just enough so that they can at least enjoy it a little bit.
But so now we have now it's 4, I guess. We had 3 that just kind of rose to the top as the best, and they all kind of have their niche, and it's starting to be a bit blurry, I think. But we have King Song, which is known for their design, which I think this year they really kind of showed that off as far as like just aesthetics go. I never really thought about it because I don't know, like I don't think that like a 14D is all that pretty. I don't know. But so King Song is known for their good design. We'll call it aesthetics, I guess. And then in motion reliability, I think, is what I associate with them. Just like good build quality that's a bit robust, and we saw those Braille skate guys just torturing a V8, and then we had Gotway, which was the utter performance but lack of reliability, lack of design sense. But then eventually there was what I think, just tell me if you agree, the nail in the coffin that okay, Gotway can be trusted now, which was the MSX.
I don't know if the word like can be trusted is ever a thing.
People let's say they were safe enough. They were at the same safety level as the other two, to where like you weren't going to randomly cut out when you hit a bump about this big.
Well, I mean, no, like I would say that Gotway was doing that long before, like with the Tesla, with all the prior wheels. Like they were known for high performance wheels, so you can always kind of push them further. It's just that I don't think anything was radically different. I mean, the MSX was a radical wheel because it's the first wheel that was able to push the kind of speed that that modern wheels seem to hit pretty regularly. Like I still remember watching like a Hsiang review where he was just like, man, this, there's whispering of this wheel actually be able to go faster than 40 miles an hour. Can you imagine that? Like, what, he was like,
and it was one of the first that did 18x3 that like was actually fast as well, right? Because before that we just had the 18S from Kingsong, right? I think that was the only wide-tired giant wheel.
This is like
the
where
alien wheel.
Yeah, this is worrying a little bit because that's also like when the Z10 came out, and that was a huge deal at the time. And
why do you think that gained so much like public outside the niche prominence?
So this is before my time, but the Ninebot S1, the last electric unicycle that Ninebot had made was a really good wheel. It was very robust. And you can really beat it to crap, and it was a very it was fun to ride, and I mean you heard a lot of good review for it, but they didn't really do anything for several years, and people thought that they were done, and then all of a sudden they came out and said oh, we're back at it, and here's this radical thing that's like nothing else. I mean, that 4-inch wheel looks really cool, and I still think it's one of the best looking electric unicycle ever made. And also just the fact that Ninebot being who they are, and with the kind of resources that they're able to bring to bear, that no other company could hope to match.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it became like it blew up publicly, like I said, outside of our spheres, because it looks like someone ripped it off a motorcycle, right? Like it looked like a motorcycle tire that you just cut off the front of a motorcycle and a guy's riding it around. So it was at the time the most futuristic sort of cyberpunk-esque type of wheel we ever saw. But as you know, it had a lot of problems that started to surface over time.
Before we get to that, I just want to say that
I feel a fanboy moment.
The best indication to me of how just absolutely blown away everyone was at the introduction of the Z10, and how how much anticipation they were, was the fact that my best friend Chris, Grumpy Cat, was so excited that he decided that he was going to fly to I think it was CES, and just to try this wheel.
Wow.
and this is the man who's skeptical of every
I
single
think he got
wheel
burned
ever.
after that, though. I think now he's super like, I don't get out of bed for any tech.
I think that was the last time he was willing. He
Right.
gave enough trust to love, and ever
But
since
he liked
then,
the
he hates
Z10 though,
everything.
right? He rode it quite a bit.
He rode it for a little bit, but I think he sold it pretty quickly because of all the issues.
So the issues, off the top of my head, are, we'll start with the like less crazy ones. The trolley handle was meh. The way you filled your tire was way too cumbersome than it needed to be. Just the whole like this peephole thing, and then you had to stick the thing. So that was a little bit weird. So again, we're starting with the real docile stuff here. And then we had the issue with the fact that like there was no fast charger for this thing. So if you were going to take a long distance ride where maybe you had to charge in between, you're not charging fast. Like I distinctly remember a guy came from Massachusetts. Jeremy, you know who you are. Came with us. Didn't charge. Was it Jeremy? Yeah, I think it was Jeremy. No, wait. Doesn't matter. One of the Massachusetts guys came with us. Started at 70% battery to make a trip that was fairly long distance where we went, and he had no hope. And when we got there, we were all charging. We all had fast chargers or whatever, or two chargers. and it was like he had to catch a cab on the way back.
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't even like all those things you can deal with, but the problem there's a few kind of major issues with that wheel, which is that there were I think some of the wiring wasn't as robust as they needed to be, so there were a lot of instances where the motor were burning out, and specifically the wires in the motor were burning out, which was I believe what ended up happening to my wheel.
Catching fire, I guess, is the big main one.
I don't think any of them ever caught fire. I think like there were.
Didn't yours catch fire?
No,
Well, I definitely have seen video of them on fire. That's undisputed.
Right. I mean, so there was that. There was the ghost drain, which is like the. So I think I think the Z10 is the first wheel that actually have a battery managing system that track every cell, so you can actually see the performance of each individual cell in that wheel, which is very good. Except that same BMS for whatever reason require power, and it drains the wheel even if you just leave it sitting there for doing nothing, like 1% a day. So it was slowly discharging itself down to 0. And
So even if it was not on?
even if it was not on.
Weird.
As a matter of fact, like
Or awful, I should say.
yeah, my Z10 is right now, like I don't have enough room in my apartment, so I leave it at my parents' house. So when I go see them, I actually have to check on it, and I will plug it in to recharge it, even though it's just sitting there, because it would drain itself down to 0, and at that point, that's very bad for the battery.
Right.
And then it would enter like this hibernation state, and then you need to do like crazy special
jump
thing
start.
to get it started, and even then, like it's very bad for the battery. It may kills the battery altogether. So like the problem is that either they didn't know, or whatever the case is, a lot of the wheels arrived with no battery, with 0% charge, and then that in turn,
Because they sat for weeks on the boat.
exactly, and then they caused the battery to go bad. So like the first batch, with a lot of things went wrong.
That's a wild oversight.
I think again, like this is my
Especially, like I said, you just pointed out that they showed up dead on arrival.
So again, this is my personal speculation. So they were working on the Z10 at the time when the electric scooter boom started. So that is basically equivalent to you have your YouTube channel that you love working on, you publish a video, and then all of a sudden someone comes to you and say, Mickey, I love your work, I'm gonna give you $10 million, no more than that, like $100 million to work on your editing business or whatever things, and you're just like, oh my god, and you're not even thinking about this YouTube thing. You're just like, I gotta focus that's exactly what happened to Ninebot. Like they initially had some, they wanted to do the EUC things or whatever, and they were developing the Z10, and then somewhere in the middle of that process, the electric scooter boom happened. Like Bird, Lying, all this scooter sharing company started, and were start to buy like just hundreds of millions of dollars worth of electric scooter from Ninebot. Ninebot is the largest electric scooter manufacturers in the world, like by far. A lot of the company that a lot of the electric scooter you buy, even if it's not Ninebot brand, it's made by them, because they're the company, they're the factory behind it all. So they're just flushed with all this money coming in, and all of a sudden EUC is just not even a blip on their radar. So somewhere in the middle of that development process, it lost steam. So towards the end, when it was pushed out the door, it was not 100% product.
Right. I should say too, as a side note, I think we might have passed it. We basically hit the 1 hour mark on our re-record. So I call this, my good friend Francisco likes to joke about how long these are. So I'm like, Francisco, every hour I'll call you out. This is the Francisco 1 hour mark. But no, so I think that, I think we learned pretty quickly with EUCs which ones are more trouble than they're worth. And it seems like the Z10 kind of had a lot of that going for it, in the sense that also riding it was, as you know, like you had to ride it a bit differently than a typical EUC. Like just the way you carved and stuff on the thing was like sort of the opposite. Maybe not the opposite, but it seemed counterintuitive to every other way you would. So when people buy that as a first wheel, because you can kind of still do that, I think. I'm like, oh.
So this is the thing. Like whenever someone asks me, right, like, oh, I'm starting. I like to buy, and what wheel should I get? And I always say, oh, buy
Z10.
well, no. I always say buy a used wheel. Whatever you can, buy a used wheel, and this way you can kind of beat it up, not worry about it, this and that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do notice, I think that first wheel, like, and
I know where you're going.
I don't count my i5 because that's not really a real like EUC. It's like a toy. But the first real EUC you get and ride, that like shapes you as a rider. Like that makes you into a certain
I still
kind
think you're
of
the
rider.
only one that thinks this.
Like I think that it changed you. Like to this day, if you watch me, I still ride with my right leg right up against the wheel and still ride with my left leg all the way out, because on a Z10, like the thing wobbles, so you have to stabilize it. So it also requires a lot more feedback. So what I would do is I would use my right leg to stabilize it, and I would like use my left toe to push on the very tip of the pedal to give it that like huge amount of input to get it to do different things. So like that, I still ride all my wheels that way, even though I don't ride a Z10 no more.
Maybe I can go down the path with you a little bit, but like I'm thinking like one of my first wheels was a 14-inch wheel. So at least this extends to my advice to people, which is if you're going to buy a unicycle, a used one, or whatever your first one is, I recommend you start smaller. Not because I'm trying to like boost sales for somebody, but I actually think that it teaches you, how to ride better. Like you learn the immediacy of carving, and then like how to carve deep and not too deep. I tend to think that a smaller diameter tire, or just even width, trains you better. It's like it hones your martial arts skills on an EUC. So then when you get on a Sherman or a Monster or a MSX or whatever, you like know the fundamentals,
Mm-hmm.
and so that a lot of people who start on these massive wheels, and I cannot get behind anyone starting on a Sherman, like that just boggles my mind. But I get why it blew up like the Z10, so I get why people who have never been in this are like, oh, I got a Sherman as my first wheel, and I'm like, I feel like it's a bad idea. But those guys are inherently, unless they're trying hard, they're probably not. They're gonna be worse riders, because you're starting on this big honking thing that just kind of just takes you forward.
I think, this is why, that's someone who start on the small wheel that, like, would think that. Like, for me, right, my relationship with the wheel, like the tire, the wheel, is very different. Like, you don't control it, you negotiate with it. You're like, I like to go left, and the wheel like, I don't know. I guess so. We'll go a little bit left, but not too left.
I put my wheel in a corner.
So it's always like, so this is why I tend to gravitate, this is why I went from the Z10 to the Monster. Again, like it's a giant tire that has a little bit of mind of its own, and you always like kind of, it's not like it'll do whatever you want. It'll kind of, you have to work with it.
Sure.
It's like a negotiation,
Yeah. Well, I think so. Now we have a lot of these more powerful wheels. People tend to not understand, even some of these companies, that more power doesn't necessarily just mean because I'm trying to go faster. When I say power, I also mean like volts as well. So like 100 volt is a safer wheel than a 67 or an 84 volt, because you just have a bigger power ceiling to your name, so to speak. And, it gives grace for bad riding, which a lot of people, even if they've been riding a year, still need. So I think that like now, my dream would be that all these newer unicycles all be 100 volt, no matter how physically big or small they are, because I feel like it's a necessity to keep us safer. Ben, Lazy Rider, has been harping on. He wants a 100 volt MCM5, like no one's business, which I don't think he's wrong about. And I don't think it would cost them much more at all to do that. I just don't. So it could just be easily implemented. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that.
I really don't know enough about like the whole like I don't know enough about electrical engineering to know that to understand the intricacy behind that. I mean, all I do know is that the Z10, for instance, I think it's like 67 volt. That
Yeah.
thing does like 28 miles per hour.
Impressive
So,
for a 67, but arguably less safe.
well, I mean that wheel is mod capable of even greater speed. So, like I don't know whether or not the relationship between speed, power, and voltage is really that direct. I also have heard speculation that the volt like not speculation, but the way I have heard it said that going up the voltage is just a cheap and easy way of achieving greater speed. That there's other ways of engineering it. It's just that upping the
My
voltage.
question though is maybe they can achieve it like this, the Z10 did. Because at the time we had the 18L or XL, it was doing like 31 and it was 84 volts. So the fact that a 67 volt was doing 28 is pretty impressive. But my question is like, can they do it as safely? Because again, we don't deal in electricity. That's not our day job. I'm sure that some of you who do are like, what are these idiots talking about? But like it seems to me that you have a lot more power to draw from with the 100 volt either way. There's just a bit of more ceiling. Like, let me know if I'm an idiot here. And if I'm, but again, I'm sort of standing on the shoulders of people who've talked to us, before this, right? Like, there's a lot of talk in our super nerdy circle about these sort of things, and so you kind of pick up on things here and there. So, I'm assuming there are people amongst us who aren't as dumb as we are on the subject, who
I
are
feel
saying
like-
things that make sense.
I don't know. I feel like the problem is that there's a lot of like there are a few people who have the expertise in the community. However, as in the trouble with the internet is that we all have the same voice, regardless of whether or not we each of us know what we're talking about. So there's a lot of noise, and it's a little bit hard to kind of tell what is true and what is not.
Right.
I mean, so I try not to kind of focus on the actual kind of mechanism behind why these wheels are able to do what they do. I'm kind of personally more interested in what they're actually able to do and what it actually means.
Yeah, I mean, like, I am down with that. Like, just a realism of like, what does this number get me, right? Like, we can
Right.
talk about watt hours, amp hours, and all that jazz, volts all day long, but what can this wheel actually do?
Like the thing that fascinated me, and I don't have an answer to this, and that is that we all know that Gotway recognized Veteran as a threat to their business. And
Oh
they-
boy, do they!
Right, and they know that speed was the one advantage that the Sherman has. So they know that people want speed. I think. I mean, they're able. They should be able to kind of figure out that much.
Duh.
So it seems it puzzles me as to why is it that they seem to have such a hard time to make a wheel that is faster. Like why doesn't the RS go as fast? I mean, if they release the RS and say, okay, this thing free spin at 110 kilometers per hour, and it'll be just as fast as the the Sherman, that thing would sell. Like that's not a
Yeah.
huge
Well,
speed up, but
The battery is smaller on the RS too, right? Compared to the Sherman's 3200 watt. I don't know what the RS
oh yeah,
is.
the Sherman is significantly larger in battery, but like I mean, again, like I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe they can make the curve steeper so that it drops off quicker.
Well, basically though, we're dealing with this. Gotway was sitting on their ass, coasting as the king of performance, right?
Right.
Then the Veteran thing happened, which actually Jason had told me about like 9 months beforehand, but he's like, you can't tell anyone. But all I was told was like, there's a faction of Gotway that has broken off and started a new company. I knew this 9 months ahead of time. That's all I knew though. Didn't know what that meant. What does that actually mean at the time? But
I mean,
anyways.
you don't know. Like at the time, all the way till I open up the box with the Sherman in it. Who knew like whether or
Right.
not this could work? I mean, this is like completely untested, and like you just don't know. Like this is actually very surprising, and this still blows me away. Like this is their very, very first product. It's incredible that they were able to like hit one out of the park, like right off of the bat. Like this, it's a combination of like a really good product and the fact that it just seemed to have captured the imagination of the public.
I mean, you have a startup, essentially. I mean, they have a bit of a background, but as you should, with their first product on the market becoming the hottest selling product in the market.
And it's the most expensive wheel on the market. Well,
not anymore.
Close to it, because at the time the Monster was 2,800. Did the Sherman come out at 2,800 also? Yeah. So it is next to Monster the most expensive wheels. I mean, when I was reviewing it, I remember thinking that it was going to be a niche wheel because, why would someone starting with ride to ride an EUC wants a wheel that's as heavy, as fast, and as expensive as the Sherman? Like it's
yeah. Well, I think the reason where you were incorrect in your analysis is probably not too far off in the sense of like typically, yes, that logic makes sense from years past, but weirdly enough, for whatever reason, maybe someone fell asleep at YouTube that day. I'm not sure, but like Kuji's video took off, similar to the Z10 phenomenon. Sorry, but you know what I mean. Like it's just kind of like there's nothing about the video that's any different from any other video that he would have produced, right? There's nothing. If we're really honest, it's the same old typical thing he puts out.
It was a very good video. I gotta give him credit.
Same music, same style. Like everything is the same.
There's that really cute clip of him falling over in front of the girl. That was very funny.
But my point is, aside from that, it's the same old thing that it took off in the culture. Like the masses around the planet saw this thing. Obviously, like I said, it's just like the Z10. Something about it somehow caught. I don't know, except maybe someone fell asleep at YouTube. I don't know what it is, but it caught. I'm not saying Kuji made a bad video. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't like, whoa, this shit is way better than what Kuji normally does. No, it was on par with his normal high quality. But it took off, and I think that's what added to, it sort of becoming a big thing like that you're like still blown away why anybody would buy it. And now it can only explain why somebody who's never touched a unicycle, who maybe even thought that looks dangerous, or I could never balance on that thing, decided to buy the most expensive one as their first, the one with the heaviest weight at the time. That is just you have to. There's something else going on in the zeitgeist there.
It is. I mean, it is like an incredible like kind of convergence of different things. I mean, the thing is that the EUC is really, like, we're used to it. We ride it and we're just like, okay, this is what it is. But for someone who is not accustomed to it, it's an incredible... Like, I just spoke to one of my friends yesterday who have no prior knowledge of it. And, I mentioned to him I do this YouTube thing. I make videos. And, he politely acknowledged it. And he said, oh, that sounds really cool. Maybe I'll check it out sometime. And then, of course, a lot of time your friend said this and they never do. And then finally he did. And then he was like, I watched like 6 of your video. He's just like, this thing is insane. He's like, I saw you right into the freaking First Avenue tunnel while you're talking and doing like 30 miles an hour. And you're like flying off of speed bump. He's like, this thing is mind boggling.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, that's what it is. And it's just like, it's one of those things that like, once you see it, you can't like, it's like I remember like wingsuit flying, right? Like you like I remember the first.
Still pretty dangerous, by the way.
It's super dangerous, and there's like 2 people in the world that does it because the third guy died, right?
Yep.
So, but it became a thing because once you see it, it's so mind blowing. You're just like, this thing is absolutely incredible,
right?
And the EUC is like right in that category. It just that the wingsuit flying existed before, but there was that one video of the guy who was just like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be really close to the mountain this time. And I'm sure it's not even that he he was the first guy who flew next to a mountain. Who just said, "Oh, I'm gonna be a little bit closer this time, and I'm gonna I'm gonna have a camera with me or something." Like it's like a confluence of different things, and maybe even the weather that day was just the perfect thing for that video.
Sure.
And it just like it all aligned to kind of make this just this is like like nobody could predict virality, like especially with social media.
Yeah.
So it's
well, also we because of the pandemic, we had a huge boom in EVs popularity, which all of us knew would eventually come, but the pandemic sort of like, if you looked around every year, Chris and I, my buddy Chris, every year we look around and we say to ourselves, next summer is going to be the summer where it explodes. And it kind of incrementally gets a little bit more EVs. But this summer was wild. I mean, now you look around, you're like every, Bob, Dick, and Jane is on a scooter. You're like, what? And my local barista, this lovely Jewish guy that owns the little coffee shop next to me, like, he always sees me on my wheel and he started being curious. He's seen me for like years. Now he started asking me questions about it, and then I'm answering, and he was like, "Cool, you seem pretty knowledgeable." And he was like, and I was like, I have all these different ones. Like, I see you in different ones all the time. I'm like, yeah. He goes, "Do you pay for them all?" I'm like, I get a deal. And he was like, "How? What? Do you have a discount or something?" I'm like, "Well, I have this YouTube thing or whatever." And he was just like, "Whoa, you like do stuff with this stuff?" Like, so it's. But anyway, so recently the other day he was like, "I'm looking into a good scooter. Like, what do you recommend?" And so we had like a 5-minute conversation. I said, "But you know what? Look at my buddy Kevin on the West Coast. Like, he had Alien Rides his channel. He's probably one of the best scooter guys around." And he goes, "I've been watching Alien Rides." I was like, "Well, then why are you talking to me, bro? It's all right there." So yeah, there's been a huge EV boom, which is great for all of us.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And my private, my own speculation, and maybe my views are skewed because I like EUCs, but I feel like eventually people will all like gravitate towards the EUC because it just has the best performance and longest range. Like, I mean,
Best
that was
bang for your buck.
Yeah, it's the shift I saw here in New York. Like, before it was a lot of like, e-board and a lot of in recent year there's more electric bike also, but it's like a lot of people converted. Before at some point it was just like, Tishan and I think one or two other people, and now like, we have grown so much more.
There was for a while a huge conversion rate happening between e-boarders and unis here in New York. But yeah, now we have e-bikes like Onyx and Super 73 have come on the scene. And then we have Huck Bike and like just a whole bunch of different people that are out there. But what do you think is going to be? So I see EUC aside. Well, we can kind of talk about that too. But what do you think the future is going to be? I guess for EVs and I guess EUC. Like, what if you had to imagine? 20 years from now.
Oh my God.
What will the scene look like? Because for me, I still think it's, unless we see a rapid change or something, EUC is still going to be that thing where a lot of people still say, looks cool, looks efficient, but it scares me.
I mean, first of all, predicting the future is next. I still,
your specialty, isn't it? Not you have a rumor channel, isn't that your YouTube channel is all about rumors?
I was going through like my archive videos like recently because I was looking for something, and I saw a video I actually recorded walking across the Queensboro Bridge because it was like the 2003 blackout.
Oh, okay.
And electricity went out in New York City, nothing works, and this happened I think like 10 o'clock in the morning. So couldn't work. So everyone had to go home. The subway was off, so the only way to do it is if you walk home.
Oh, fascinating.
So I was like recording. I had like a little like recorder at the time. Like I don't even remember what the name is, but I made all these videos of my way walking home. And you see people like just giant crowd of people walking right in the middle of the street because they block all the car traffic just so people can walk home. And I was looking at it. I was just like, something about the scene looks really weird. And it was it's color. No, I mean regardless of fact, people walking. And I realized it was because nobody was looking at their phone.
Oh.
because the smartphone did not exist back then. Like now, you look at a crowd, like at least a third of the people is looking at
They're
their
walking
phone.
around their
They're
phones
walking
like
and
this
they're looking at their
all
phone.
day.
And everybody, like the entire crowd, was just walking, looking, and talking with each other. And like this is like the changes, like beyond just the appearances of that, is monumental, and that's only been like 15 years. So looking 15 years forward, like it could be anything. Like this is the thing that I find most like interesting about like technology like electric unicycle. Again, it's just like the ramification. We have only begun to understand what this could actually mean. Like right now, like we're all riding around like, oh, this is a lot of fun, and and we do our own things and we enjoy the benefit of being able to get around really quickly. But it's like rudimentary. It's like, imagine if in this entire city, only the people who have electric unicycle have a smartphone.
Right.
Like the things that you can do. And there was a time, because I always loved technology, there was like, so I got a smartphone really early on. I had a Trio, which I managed to somehow actually install an app that allowed me to watch TV. And I still remember I was sitting outside watching TV on my phone,
That you were like, I'm the future.
Exactly.
Right
I'm like,
now.
and people were like just blown away by what. But anyway, just like, but that is basically the moment of where we are right now with EUC. Like, there's no infrastructure, there's no interest, there's no development. There are, but compared to like mass adaptation of a technology, what we're seeing is really just like a glimmer of possibility.
Right. That's what I was saying before. And people are looking to buy something that's like a few years older, like an original Ninebot wheel. It's like asking me, what do you think about buying a horse and buggy versus the latest Toyota Camry? Like,
Right.
I really think you should get the Camry. On the lower end, like buy a cheaper King Song or InMotion or Gotway wheel that's like from, 2017 and on. I wouldn't go before that. They're just like, I don't know, but it's a $50, Mick. What do you think? I'm like, I think you don't want a horse and buggy that's gonna dump you.
Like, not even that. Like, even like beyond that, I feel like. I still remember I was reading this article where they interview the guys that were designing like a smartphone at Microsoft. And they were saying like they had a prototype that looked like a Trio, which has a square screen on top with a keyboard physical underneath it.
Right.
They worked on it for like 2 years. And they were going to release it 6 months after the release of the iPhone. And the head developer said that, they were watching the Steve Jobs presentation, and they said, within that first minute, they're like, our project is dead. They're like, what we were working on right now, this thing is by comparison,
That's gotta be crazy.
Look like a freaking piece of like technology from the Stone Age. And he's like, after that, we just scratched it. He's just like, we have to, completely, because and again, remember, like the iPhone was not like a revolution from a technical point of view.
Right.
Like all of those technology were available, even like the multi-touch. Like I remember seeing like there was this guy, I forgot his name, but there was this professor from NYU who did this presentation on TED like 4 years prior to the introduction of the iPhone on the multi-touch. At the time, it was on a screen. So he was in front of the crowd and he was, talking about, and at the time he was like, I just want to talk about multi-touch because I feel like this is the technology that nobody is really utilizing. So he came up with all these different way of using it. And like things now were just like, oh, this is so obvious. Things like, he opened up like this, photo browsing app. And instead of everything lay out in a grid, it was just photos scattered on the screen. He's like, oh, I can select one of these and just move it. And then I can open it, enlarge it by just doing the 2-finger drag. Which is, of course, you're just like, duh. Yeah. But at the time, like literally when he did this, like the entire crowd, and this is TED, so that's CEO, freaking Nobel Prize winner. And like all these guys, the entire crowd goes, oh my God, like when he did that. And literally, like after that, like someone like didn't even, like he was talking, someone just like, who are you? Where are you? Who are you with? Like in the middle of his speech, they were so blown away by this simple thing.
They're over it. They're blown away.
So again, like, you know, it was the thing that made the iPhone work. It was a perfect combination of leveraging the right technology, the right design, and the right marketing by the right company. So
do you think that'll hit us in the EUC world? Can
that
someone
is
do that?
the thing I would love to see, and that is the thing that would really be transformative, because like the smartphone literally went like, you know, from a slow steady growth to like freaking vertical climb.
I think you're always, out of the two of us, a little more hopeful for when things happen in the community, that you're like, hey man, this is gonna be great for us. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if it is.
I think it will, because I think this is it's truly a transformative technology, because just from my personal experience, I know what it has done for me, and I know like not just like physically, but like socially, I have noticed that, you know, everyone I talk to who rides an EUC, they're like, oh yeah, you know, I all the people that I ride EUC with, I see all the time. Like, you know, there's this sense of community building that I don't see with nothing else.
I wonder if when it becomes more ubiquitous, people will like it less. You know, there's a bit of aspect that all of us are well aware of, which is like, we know we're sort of the rebels in the city. Like, you know, like nobody, it's not that well sought after piece of transportation. So it's like this novelty, the fact that we're sort of the select few right now. I wonder, like, if that'll, I don't know, like if people like us will eventually like it less or something. Like, what if it becomes a commonplace?
So, I mean, so I'm an architect, and for the last
Wait, what? I'm just kidding.
So, for the last few years, my unfortunately my specialty has been designing offices, and the thing that, you know, we like to talk about is the importance of proximity, because, you know, this is how interaction really take place. Like, for you to really, you know, like if you think in terms of like bandwidth, right? Like nothing match this, because I can like look at, you know, Mickey's, and if you raise an eyebrow, I can see it, you know, like it's hard to get like a sense of a person. And when you're just looking at it in a little screen, there's all this signal. Sure. Like actually, I recently I'm reading this book from Malcolm Gladwell, who's one of my favorite author, called Blinked, and he was in one of the first example he gave in that book was that he was saying that the Getty Museum was looking to purchase this sculpture, a Kuro, which is like a Greek sculpture of a boy, and they hire all this like, you know, really like top-notch, you know, scientists and everything to study the thing. They like the guy, like, you know, study the surface, you know, like material chemically, and figure out whether or not it can be you know, actually from 3,000 years ago.
Right.
They did all this study. After like, I think 10 months, they confirmed that it was legit, so they made the purchase. They spent $10 million to buy this piece, and then they said they had an opening, and they invited all these, you know, art curator who are, you know, who usually, you know, deal with this sort of thing, and Malcolm Gladwell interviewed one of these guys, and the guy said, I walked into the room, I saw the thing. He's like, and immediately I had just this nasty gut feeling just in my stomach. And he's like, I immediately went over to the guy at the museum and just said, did you transfer the fund? Did you pay for this? And he's like, I don't know why, but something didn't feel right. You know, because there were, you know, like as a human, there's all these things that your subconscious read that you don't recognize, like, you know, consciously, that give you information. I guess what I'm trying to say is that nothing beats having this proximity and having this direct face-to-face relationship, and everyone knows is super important. That's why people spend all this money on expensive rent here in the city. When you go to a realtor's office, they would draw a circle that says, okay, this is the 15 minutes walk from your apartment. There's all these cool things. That's why you're paying $6,000 a month on this office.
Oof.
So now 15 miles radius for me covers the entirety of Manhattan.
Yeah.
So that is a very different thing. Imagine
There's no way to see the city other than on one of these things.
right.
Side note too, because I'm tempted to ride very fast all the time because it's fun. I like to say I'm microdosing adrenaline. When I had to do a review of the V8F, I literally could not go that fast. And it was kind of nice. Not nice that I was going so slow, but nice that I was oh, I actually can take some of this in like I used to. You can still obviously choose to ride slower, but like I said, there's nothing better than people I know who've lived here their whole life, or I don't know, 10, 20 years, who have never been certain places or never even looked up and seen a certain thing, maybe within their 5-mile radius of their apartment, that this sort of opens you up to see all that stuff.
It's I have ridden yes, they can, these wheels could do 45 miles an hour, 50 miles an hour. But the thing that's most incredible about these wheels is the fact that they can do that, but they can also do 2 miles an hour behind somebody. I can ride at a walking pace behind another person on a sidewalk and not feel out of place. Mm-hmm. And that it's that social kind of interaction between people that you can immediately tell. If you try to ride even an electric bike right down the sidewalk, if there's a mom with a baby carriage and you can look at her right in the eye, you can see exactly where you are in terms of what it is that you are, the threat level that you pose.
Yeah, you're a nuisance for sure.
On an EUC, you are significantly lower on that on that chart, and people they can recognize. The thing is I think they can tell how much you are in control of an electric unicycle without knowing anything about it.
Yeah, they can see your body move. I guess the guys in my building now know that I have this stuff, but I can speed down the sidewalk on my block to get to my apartment, and no one bats an eye.
Right.
No one's whoa, ah.
This is the most right. Road rage exists, not because people are dicks to one another, mm-hmm. but because the body language does not translate through a car. The only way for you to signal is by pressing your horn, and so it's either 0 or 1. Either you're driving and not saying anything, or you're telling people to get the F out of your way. So there is no there's no in between. There's no body language. There's no.
How come no one has created a nice horn, hey, no offense, but the light is green? Where there are definitely in this city, there's a lot of offense. Get your ass in gear. The light is green.
Someone literally, I remember seeing an experiment where they literally try to put an eye with an eyelash instead of the headlight in front of cars. But the problem is that, again, you inside this box, people don't see you.
Right.
So as a result, you're the car. There's no social interaction. Versus, even if you're on a motorcycle, the motorcycle is so large as a machine, and you're so kind of integrate into it. You're not acting like a human being. Mm-hmm. Versus when you're on an EUC, right? Both of your hands are free, and this is incredibly important because we express, we interact with the world with our hands.
Right.
And when you have both of your hands free, you're kind of like a human, versus you with your hands on a pair of like a handlebar.
Right.
You're part of the machine.
Yeah, it's fascinating how that works. So you think in the future though it'll be much more acceptable?
I think it would be. I think not only would it be much more acceptable, but if we're lucky enough for that one magical product to really kind of convince the public at large, I think I would go back to the original Segway thing, and I would say that this is a thing that would really like reshape the world. Would really reshape the world for what is possible, because I still remember watching the original Blade Runner. And the guy opened up his window, and there's that ramen shop, the floating ramen shop that just came to in front of his window, and the guy just made a thing for him, and he just grabbed it from his window, and I'm just the technology involved is magical, but I want that connection. I don't want a bowl of ramen to arrive via a robot in a box. I want the guy to come here and make the ramen in front of me, because that is really what makes that magical.
Sure. All right. Well, is there any, just to kind of wrap it up here, is there any unicycles you're looking forward to that? I don't want to give any secrets away. We shouldn't, is what I'm saying. But is there anything?
What are you implying?
No, I'm just saying. I'm sure you and I have insider info that we shouldn't dispel. I'm not.
You're
I'm not
the
encouraging.
worst secret keeper.
No. I'm not encouraging. I'm saying I'm not encouraging you to dispel secrets. I'm saying, are there any unicycles you're looking forward to riding or testing out in the near future for yourself that already exist? No, I'm not suggesting.
I think it's really exciting time. I think it's really the thing that excites me the most is just that after this year, the expectation had changed. The expectation behind every single company had changed. Because of what happened. Because of what happened to not just Veteran, but every single company. People who put a pre-order in for a V11 in June is just getting it now, 6 months later.
That's rough.
And that is someone who is willing to put $1,000 down or whatever, and they're willing to wait that long. Imagine the amount of sales that they could have gotten if that wheels was ready to ship from the day that they announced it.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far down the track, but are they not sort of using those pre-orders to help finance the wheels a little bit too?
But regardless of that, maybe not. I don't know.
Still,
but
the 6
but
months
still,
later
it's just
is too long.
the fact that it took them. But what I'm saying is that everyone came into this year with high expectation, because they knew EVlution worked on the V11 for 2 years. They have been working on this, so they knew, they're this is going to be a runaway success. We're going to sell a lot of this, and the amount of interest is still so far beyond what they have expected that they weren't even close to be able to keep up.
Right.
And that blew them out of water. But that, by comparison to what Veteran is even... So you have every single company have far exceeded their expectation. And then you have one more who just basically a nuclear explosion.
Right.
So It's just now they know that the expectation and the level and everything is just the next level. So they know that this is, the game is on. They know that if they can achieve, they not only could match and fill the level of interest from prior year, but they may, if they're good enough, they may get to the Veteran, runaway smash home run.
Right.
That's also a possibility.
Well, here's hoping that they all have a runaway success, because that's great for us, right? And if you're listening, any of you manufacturers, we really wish your QC was a little bit better. But aside from that, yeah, I think that it would be really great for all of us if all of these companies had a runaway success like that, because then the pressure would be on for them to really perform and bring something to market that's spectacular and worth the cent, right? My last video on the Monster was, for all of the different mixed reviews out there of it. Basically, I was trying to figure out, is this thing worth the money? It is the most expensive EUC on the market now. Is it worth the money? It's not, for me, it wasn't a bad wheel, but I don't know if it's worth my conclusion was, I don't think it is. For some people, they will buy it, and that's fine. Like I said, it's not a bad wheel. But I think with all of these, it needs to be, you need to see the value, right? Like there needs to be real inherent. The Veteran nailed it clearly because people who wanted it as their first EUC. Think about that. The first EUC they ever bought, they bought a Veteran, which cost $2,800 roughly if you buy from a dealer. So like that's clearly they saw the value. So I think that's what we need for all of these moving forward, is that there needs to be a lot of value in it. We do find, for what it's worth, a lot now, for every wheel that I've purchased, clearly I found value in it. But yeah, that's I think you have a very good, hopeful view of the future. I think I basically share that with you. I don't think I disagree. But yeah, this has been a very intriguing historical conversation. No, in a great way, because I think it's like cool to hear sort of the history of it. And hopefully Shane Chen will chill out in the future. And anyone who has their hands on that patent, I think the more it gets sort of liberalized, the better it is for all of us.
I really, I'm very hopeful. And my hope is that more, the companies will improve and that more people would get involved. And still, like a part of me still wish that, like a larger company would become interested. Because yes, there's a lot of challenges, but if there's clear thoughts behind it, it could be overcome. Like someone could, it's like the MP3. Like there's ways to work around it, and what would really kind of really blow everything up is that if someone really found a good, reasonable solution that actually fits, that actually makes sense to everybody. So,
all right. Well, thank you so much. We'll have you on again, I'm sure, at some point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like this. This is fun. I appreciate it.
All right. See you guys on the next one.